All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest edition of Tavern Voices. I'm your host, Kevin King, and with me, as always, is my communist friend, Tyler Crawley. Is your audio good? I saw you make a face as we started there. If
no, it's not.
Cut out or something.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
All right, hold on. Keep talking. Keep talking. I have to. For some reason, we were fine. We were doing the thing. We were on the pre-show, and then everything just completely cut out. So I do apologize for that, but
that's okay. I'm going to keep talking, even though
keep talking. Keep talking. I'm going to sign out and then come back in. So you take the show for right now, okay?
Yeah. So anyway, this happens to Tyler all the time. For some reason, his audio keeps cutting out from his microphone, and he can't hear me at all. So, but I do want to welcome everyone here to the show, and I'm going to bring Tyler back into the stream now, and hopefully he can hear me.
That's what it's like to be me for 3 hours a day when you got no one to throw it to. You got to just maintain the crowd's attention. It's actually way easier than most people think that it is. All right, we're good. I mean, it was weird. It was weird. Normally we have those problems in the pre-show, and this time it decided to wait until the actual show. So you guys got a little behind the scenes action of Tavern Voices. So
yeah, and I blamed it on you. I said this happens all the time.
Yeah, it does. But I'm saying it always happens in the beginning. For some reason, it wanted to play a little game with us today and just wait and move forward.
It did. Maybe your audio got the coronavirus.
Is that where you want to start? You want to start with the coronavirus?
Where else would we start? By the way, in the show intro, I called you a communist, but you couldn't hear it, so I don't feel like that was very fair.
No, I did not hear that. That's okay. It's all right. I've been called worse. This week, I've probably been called worse, to be honest with you.
I see your Twitter feed. You get called.
I get called a lot. I had one person one time claim, they said, why do liberals always try and take over conservative mediums? And he was claiming that I was a liberal on talk radio. And I was like, okay. I was like, I have been called a lot of things in life. I was like, I've never been called a liberal before. So I can add that to the list. I can add to the nickname bucket list. I've now been called a liberal. So.
Well, I feel like you're kind of going that way. I can when you retweet something, I can never tell if that's more, hey, check this out. This is an interesting thought, or read this craziness going on, or I endorse this statement. And it worries me sometimes. I'm like, what? Why is this so much? Tyler Crawley retweeted, we should shut down businesses for the rest of the year.
All right. First of all, Kevin, what is the first rule of Twitter? Retweets do not equal endorsements, right? Isn't that was like the standard Twitter profile?
I thought everyone put that in their profile, which meant nothing.
I mean, well, people stopped doing it because it was like understood that because you're retweeting something does not mean I necessarily endorse that. At least that's why I figured no one puts that anymore. But no, I mean, sometimes I do. I mean, that's kind of like what I like about Twitter is I like to keep people guessing when I retweet something. Do I actually agree with it? Or am I getting ready to like dunk on the person? And usually that's the benefit of Twitter. But yeah, no, I mean, people. Well, here's what's funny though. Let's talk about that for a second, because why has this become political? And I have a theory. Do you want me to give my theory? Or do you want to give yours first?
No, I don't know that I have a theory. So you go first.
Okay. What happens? So here's my theory on why this coronavirus debate has become political. Well, first, I think it's because everything becomes political. One of my favorite things to say is anything can be political if you try hard enough. And we have tried very hard and we have made this political. But I think the real reason why this is political is because there's such little information. There's like none. And the information that comes out 10 hours later, and a study comes out and disproves the one that you just read, and you're bouncing back and forth. And so because this is an issue that there's nothing really on. I mean, there's no concrete anything. Everyone falls back into their safe place, and that's usually a political one. So all the Democrats become Democrats and all the Republicans become Republicans, and we kind of were figuring out where the sides were, and then that's where everyone is. But I think it became political because we've never had an issue that's so hotly debated that is not definable by ideology or evidence. So we've all just gone to politics because we got to fight because that's what we do. And so we're like, all right, fine. So all the Republicans choose this side and the Democrats choose this side. But there's really nothing ideological about any of the arguments. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, I know people are making an economic one, but I mean, at the same time, you could also make an economic argument for opening the government too soon and causing more damage in long term. So I think we've all just done it because it's easier to do that. So we've all made it political because it's easy.
No, I think I almost think that it's one step further than that. It's become political because that is 2020. That's what the world this is just a product of everything that's been leading up to now. Everything we talk about that on this show for the last 2 years about how everything is just home team versus the visiting team, and it's which side are you on? The light switch is on and off. There's no nuance, no debate, and I think this is it. People are already in their camps. Either you're anti-Hillary or anti-Trump, and now you're either. And I do want to say, I think.
Can I just say, I like how you said that. I like how because that defined 2020 or 2016. It was not pro Hillary, it was anti-Hillary, anti-Trump. I did like that. So sorry.
Yeah, I try to be specific with the way that I look at that wonderful election that we had to choose from. But with coronavirus, I think you do have your extremes. You have your people who legitimately think this is like a made up event, and you also have people who think that it's going to kill everyone and we should keep the economy shut down perhaps forever, and just keep printing money and do universal basic income and destroy the actual free market economy. And you do actually have those people in real camps, which is a little scary. But I think everything else in between is just that reaffirming of beliefs. This is the first global pandemic where you have social media to tell you what you want to hear. You have any news source saying whatever your preconceived notions of the situation were. And that's just the reality of where we've been at for the last 5 or 6 years, really.
That's true. And so this, isn't that surprising, but I think it's so amazing because everything else I get being political, but the idea that a virus has become political is pretty amazing. And it's kind of hard to watch, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, was conservative media, because conservative media was definitely what's so weird about this is how it sort of started, like how it manifested. Because if you remember in the beginning, Trump was a little dismissive of the virus. And so, of course, like conservative media was like, all right, that's what we're doing. And so they were all sort of in that camp. But then Trump, I don't know if it was, some have said that it was Imperial College London study that showed 2 million people dying, that he was like, oh crap. And very quickly was like, we're going to shut this down. We should shut this down. We should do this. We're going to, everything. But the conservative media didn't really go on board with it. Like, I mean, if you listen to Rush anytime, any day the last 2 months, I mean, he has been completely on board with this being overhyped and this not being anywhere near as bad. And maybe we shouldn't be listening to these experts. And so it's kind of funny. There was that divergence that took place. And, it's funny, if you watch these protests, you would think that Trump is 100% on board. And it's hard to tell with Trump. I mean, that's sort of what he's known for, right? Where it's kind of hard to pinpoint where he is because, one day he's like, liberate Virginia. And then the next day he's like, Virginia should do what it wants to do. It's like, you just don't know where he is on some of these issues. But it is kind of interesting. There's that divide where Trump goes back and forth about being worried about this thing. And he's shutting down immigration because of the concern of this thing spreading. And some are saying, well, he has an ulterior motive, but that's still a pretty strong step to make that argument. And so to me, it is sort of interesting that everyone is sort of like, okay, Trump people are on this side and then Biden people are on this side, but Trump isn't really on that side. So that to me is what's kind of fascinating about the political divide.
Yeah. And you know what is another divide that I have really seen come to the forefront probably in the last week, now that things have stabilized as far as the coronavirus situation. And we're starting to see a little bit more data of these curves in different countries. And we're not in that panic situation anymore. And I think that this goes directly into the 2016 election. It goes directly into the Trump into the Trump popularity and how he won the election is the urban rural divide. Because I think what you see right now is not as much, like you said, ideological. It's more of, okay, does New York City set the precedent for rural states all over the country having to shut down when the living situation is different? You know, the way that you could contract this. I saw an article today that was talking about how they traced the coronavirus spread through the subway, and how they had the on and off points of the subway in New York City, and they could trace how those were hot zones. And so they know. So, I mean, we know that these situations are going to be treated differently in urban and rural areas. And you have this sort of media elites. You have the news host like you. No, I'm just kidding. Like, you know, these big New York City hosts who live in their apartments and they're in a different situation. And they're the ones saying, you know, you've got to stay home. We can't do this. We can't do that. And they're really broadcasting their perspective through Twitter, social media. And then you have sort of the rural people who are going, hey, I'm not affected by this. I need to work. We're blue collar. They're more, you know, most people are paycheck to paycheck, even people in cities. But I think that that's the biggest divide that I've seen come about recently, is just more of the elites versus the Joe the plumber.
Well, I mean, the only thing though is that it was funny. I was actually talking about this morning on my radio show with a mutual friend of ours, Stephen Kent.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how, you know, this myth of like the journalistic elite, the journalist that lives in DC and New York and, you know, I guess is dining out every night and getting fancy steaks and fancy wines. And it's like the newspaper, sure, there are some people like a Maggie Haberman at the New York Times, or, you know, like a Mike Allen at Axios, and, you know, they do well.
Or your TV hosts.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. You know, Joe Scarborough and yeah. But the average journalist does not make that much money. You know, it's sort of like this misnomer that journalists are like well paid. I had a guy one time calling to my show and he said, well, the only reason I support the free market and some of these ideas that I have is because I'm doing so well. And I was like, well, maybe I'm not doing as well as you think I am. And he's like, we're probably making six figures. And I was like, like, dude thinks I'm making six figures in a, you know, I don't know what you call our market, like a mid-small market. I'm like, no way, man. Maybe like 30 years ago, maybe, but that's not happening today. And so there's sort of this misnomer about that, you know, because I always like to joke with people that, you know, Hannity always calls these, you know, the journalist elites. It's like, you know, here's a guy who makes $80 million a year, doesn't fly commercial, which, by the way, awesome. Good for him, man. I wish I had a private jet.
The wall banger.
Yeah, the wall banger, as Savage calls him. But it's like, what is elite? I don't think that term is it's used differently by different people. I mean, because you have people like Warren Buffett, right? You know, Warren Buffett, who's the third or fourth richest person on the planet. And I think he still goes to like McDonald's every once in a while, right?
Every morning. I think it's like his sausage biscuit or something.
Yeah. And then you have like
change.
Some,
which is hilarious, but
you have like some journalist who's making like $30K a year in a city that, you know, he probably has two roommates, but he's having like a avocado. What's the millennial, the avocado toast? He's probably having that. And so it's like, I mean, I think we'd all agree that Warren Buffett's probably the more elite person in that situation, but he doesn't live an elite lifestyle. I mean, he does to some extent. That is an exaggeration, but you have millionaires who go to Walmart and drink Miller Lite. And then you have journalists who, you know, barely are making it and are drinking, you know, craft beer and getting like little fancy sandwiches. And it's like, oh, that guy. So how do you define elite? Is it class? Is it how much you make? Is it education? That we have to define what elite is, because it means different things to different people.
I mean, what is
Is Bill Clinton elite, right? I mean, this Arkansas bumpkin guy, but he's a Rhodes Scholar. He was president of the United States, but he still had the Bubba argument. So it's
for me to define it. I mean, from my perspective, I kind of look at it as a, you know, do you impose your thoughts on other people? You know, I think of that as an elite, someone who thinks that they are more elite than someone else. Not necessarily that they are more elite. Generally, they're not, by either socioeconomic status or education status. But you have these people who, you know, went to an elite school or have an advanced degree. You're right. They're probably making, you know, enough to get by to live in Manhattan, but they want to tweet out their thoughts and impose them on everyone else because they know better. They know better than you. And to me, that's typically what I think of as an elite. So it is someone who thinks they know better than someone else.
I mean, who are these angels that aren't doing that though? I mean, it's sort of like, I feel like everyone does that. I mean, it's sort of like both sides arguing that the other side's trying to impose their will on them, right?
Well,
I mean, isn't that the argument?
It's the irony of what you posted today on Twitter of Kevin Williamson and talking about the insiders, the DC insiders versus the the anti-establishment and the irony there. So yes, you're right, and I think it depends on how you approach it. I mean, obviously, we sit here and we try to tell everybody what we think as if it matters.
Yeah, I don't think.
But I don't think if someone thinks differently than us that they're wrong necessarily.
Well, I think what you're arguing is sort of people that advocate for a technocracy, where you have this sort of society where these technocrats run everything because they have the right credentials and they have the right everything, and so they know better and they can design society in their eyes, and it'll work out.
Their degree is above the blue collar experience or the life experience. You didn't go to college. You don't know what I know. You're not enlightened.
Yeah, but the thing is, what drives me nuts,
Socrates, is
the other side, where it's like the real America. Like real America doesn't go to college. Like that's not true. Like, and so I feel like it's sort of funny that there's sort of this elitism in this sort of anti-elitist culture, where it's sort of now manifested itself, where there's sort of this elitism about like, if you work with your hands and, you work with manual labor, like that's real America. And it's like that. No, that's fine. That's part of America. But it's like, have you ever seen that meme where it's like men with overalls built this country, men with suits destroyed it. It's like, that's such garbage. Our founders wore suits of their day. Like they were elites. Yeah. Like, I mean, Thomas Jefferson, imported wine from France. He loved French culture. Like, how elite that was back in the day. Like, think about how elite that is now. Think about then, like how elite that was. Think about just how elite our founders were. I mean, they were all established men. They were all educated. I mean, they're the definition of elite. And yet, that's okay. And it's like, why? Because they helped create this country. I mean, and it's sort of like they founded it. And so they weren't wearing overalls, they weren't working with their hands. I mean, these were men that had ideas. These were men that were philosophical. And today that's looked at as like an elite sort of position. Mm-hmm. And so my point is like, I just think that, yes, you don't want to get too caught up in the academia. You don't want to get too caught up in sort of this sort of world, like I said, world of academia, where it's like all you're talking about is theories and we're all philosophers sitting around and like discussing things that don't really matter. But at the same time, that it is important.
There are facts.
You need bankers, you need farmers, you need all these people. They're all part of society. And we've all gone into our corners and think that like the world wouldn't exist without us. Like the whole world would fall apart if my industry wasn't there. And it's like, we kind of need all of them, to be honest. I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I was watching the Bailout movie 2 weeks ago on this great documentary on HBO. Vice put it together. And I mean, they interviewed like George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke and Nancy Pelosi. And I mean, pretty much, what's his name? Timothy Geithner. I mean, everyone that was involved in the bailout back then. And what was amazing to me is they interviewed like Paulson and Bernanke and all of them. And they said, well, the reason we did the bailouts, and which, by the way, they got paid back for, is we were trying to save Main Street. It's like if the banking system collapsed, all of these banks would have gone, like AIG, I mean, would have taken down so much. All of these banks would have collapsed. The banking system, as we know it, would have collapsed. All these businesses would have gone out of business. I mean, ATMs would have stopped the spread. I mean, it would have been the Great Depression. And so they were like, their whole argument was them trying to save Main Street. But the only way to do that was they had to save Wall Street, because Main Street is reliant on Wall Street to exist. And yet it got sort of perceived as this elite bailout. And they were like, you could tell they were kind of like distraught by that, because it was like, that's who we were trying to save. But it got sort of twisted into this idea that they only saved their elite friends and left all the regular people out cold, when the whole purpose of it was to save Main Street, because Main Street doesn't exist without Wall Street. At least if Wall Street goes under, Main Street's going with it. Maybe we can reorganize the system after that, but we need Wall Street. They're very reliant. These businesses need to be able to borrow money. They need the Wall Street derivatives and securities and everything else in order to function. If they don't have it, they're going to be in some trouble. And so we need all of these companies. We need everyone. There's no real America. If you're in America, you're in real America. Rant over.
Very, very nice. So speaking of real America, something that has been going on right here in my backyard over the last 2 weeks, and I now have seen it on CNBC in commercials. We have the Reopen NC protest. I wouldn't say necessarily spearheaded, but one of our former professors is very active in that. Dr. Mike Adams has been at the forefront.
Did you ever have him for a class? I never had him for a class.
I did. Yeah,
I never did.
Criminology 101 or 102 something, intro to criminology. That's actually how I met him. It was my freshman year. I had a friend of mine who said, you got to take Mike Adams if you can get in the class.
I never had the pleasure.
Phenomenal class, actually. I don't say actually like you wouldn't believe it, but I mean, really, really awesome class. Obviously he's a very engaging speaker. So it was it's
funny because no one ever talked about his class. Like, he's known for being like this provocateur, but no one ever says, because I actually had friends of mine have taken it who are not crazy conservative and they liked it. And so it always sort of gets lost in this conversation about Dr. Adams, when he sued UNCW and, is he being, everyone always forgets that he's actually a pretty good teacher.
Yeah. No, he's phenomenal.
He's good.
I feel like he's talked about that before he became super outspoken conservative. He won all of these teaching awards of like student favorites. And if you go and Rate My Professor, he's got a super high score. I remember we're just on tangents at this point. But one of the things I really took away from his class that I enjoyed is that he had a start time for class. If it started at say 10 o'clock or 10:30, whatever, he shut the door at 10:30. If you weren't there when the door shut, you didn't come in. Like, period. You were on time. You were there to learn, or you went back home. Discipline things. He
didn't let you use a laptop either, right?
I'm sorry.
He wouldn't let you use a laptop either, right?
You couldn't have a phone out or a laptop or anything. And laptops still weren't super prevalent when you and I were there. I mean, they were there, but I would say now.
I had one in class, so I
had it, but I remember I didn't use it to take notes all that often.
No, all I did was use it to surf the web, but I had one. I remember one time listening to Rush Limbaugh in the class. Like, I pulled the stream up and like had the headphone going through my shirt sleeve so I could listen to Rush Limbaugh.
You probably learned more that day.
That's true. That is very true.
But anyway, the protests.
Protest. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So I know you're very anti-protest.
I'm not anti-protest.
I'm just kidding.
People think I'm anti-protest because I don't think protests are as impactful as everyone makes it out to be. The Moral Monday protests were, I think, a good example of that. I mean, the media hyped those protests and they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone, and what's so funny is the Dr. Reverend Mr. Barber has like failed his way upward. Now he's like got this national position, and big shock, he hasn't done anything. Remember, they're like, oh man, he's going to take this national. I'm like, what is failed protest? Like, okay, cool. He did it. He done nothing. He did nothing in North Carolina. And so I think they're especially when they're overtly political. The Tea Party, what was so amazing about the Tea Party was it was people who were yelling at Democrats and Republicans. And the Moral Monday protest, it was all Republicans. You knew it was all Democrat liberals who weren't going to vote for Republican anyway. So Republicans said, I don't care what you're having to say. And that's what I kind of see in these protests is everyone's wearing a Trump hat and a Dan Forest shirt. And, that's great. Free speech. But none of the politicians, Cooper's not like, oh no, I'm going to lose their vote. He knows he never had their vote. And so they're not as impactful. But I do think that they matter. I mean, 1,000 people gathering. I just wish they'd be smarter about it. I wish they would have been a little bit more safer with that social distancing because I don't know. I think it was they're sort of like yelling that we need to be left to our own devices because we can social distance on our own. But then during the protest, they weren't doing it. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of a bad example for them to be doing that. Like, well, if you're going to say, hey, we can do this, we don't need you. And then you're doing this thing they're telling you not to do. It kind of hurts your argument a little bit.
Well, and if it was a anti or a pro social distancing protest, perhaps I don't think that was their main goal.
What they're saying is that we can do it.
Your point.
But here, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Ask me a question.
So I think that what they have also done is they've sort of made themselves. I mean, they're gonna prove themselves right or wrong because they all got together. They were not social distancing. And so if 5-6 days from now, we see a spike in cases and it looks like, oh my God, like what happened? And we trace it back to that rally, that's going to hurt their cause. But if we don't see a spike and everything remains as is, then they'll prove that we can go back. So that rally could end up either proving them right or proving them wrong, but it's going to do one or the other, I think. So we're going to find out in 5 or 6 days if their arguments were right. I mean, it's not going to be definitive. I mean, it's not going to be completely scientific, but I think it'll give you a good idea of were they right or wrong on the issue.
Was there a question in there?
Yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, you think
do I agree with you?
Going to hurt or help them?
No, I don't think it's going to hurt or help them either way. And I think this goes a little bit to more and more of the information we're starting to see come out now with the serological tests and stuff that, you know, we've talked about on this show a multitude of times about what is the actual denominator. And it seems to be much larger than initially thought. Some extremes, 80%, some, 40%, 30%, on these different studies now that they're doing just mass serological testing. So I mean, okay, let's say there were 1,000 people there yesterday and, what, half caught it and 90% were asymptomatic. There's not going to be a spike in cases from that protest. What, 15 people are going to get tested for it?
No, but I mean,
I don't think that's going to change the narrative.
If somebody gets it and then they give it to someone else, and then I'm saying is if there is a spike.
So you're saying that they have a higher chance of spreading it than all of the people at Home Depot today. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, what I'm saying is they weren't practicing social distancing. And so,
I know, I'm giving you a hard time. Yeah. I mean,
but what I'm saying though is that if there isn't a spike, it helps their argument. It helps their argument if there's not a spike, because they can say exactly what you're saying is that, we didn't do what anyone else was already doing anyway. But I'm saying is if there is a spike and they're able to trace it back to the rally, that's going to then really kind of blow up in their face. But if there's not a spike, which there may not be, then they have a great argument. Look what we just did 5 days ago. We saw no spike. So why can't we do this every day? I mean,
I think that's a great point, because that's kind of what it goes back to, is that I believe I said it 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, if this is as super contagious as they say it is, I mean, when you're talking about double masking to inhale versus exhaling it, where everybody's wearing a mask. I don't mean 2 masks by double, but like both parties wearing it for each of those reasons. Then, and it's just it's highly transmissible. They were talking about the R naught of 3. I don't know if that's going to get adjusted. I don't know how you account for social distancing to adjust that number, because I'm sure it's not 3 when people aren't standing next to each other and riding the subway. But if this thing really has spread like it has, and a lot of these tests are showing that 4 or 5% of the population has already had this, and it's still multiplying in that exponential factor, then I mean, this could definitely say, hey, we can go to the grocery store, we can go to Lowe's, we can go get our haircut, right? I mean, that's the point.
Well, I mean, I think so. I mean, the problem that we're running into once again is that, it's like every time a study comes out and everyone's like, look at this, is you just have to wait, because there's one that came out in Sweden that they did the same, what is it, Sero survey or whatever. And they had like a multiple of like 1,000. So they were saying that, for every one person they've tested, there's 1,000 more people that have it. And that by May 1st, 600,000 Swedes are going to have it. And they've already pretty much pulled back on the study, saying like, whoops, we accidentally messed up. And there's this other one that came out of California from Santa Clara, where they've run up against some people who have said that their math isn't right. And they've over exaggerated how many people may have actually contracted this thing. And I think this is the problem, is that science. This is the scientific method. I mean, you test something, you go through it, you do the calculations, and then people review it, and then they usually try and crap on it, and then you revise and you try and figure out again. And so the problem is we're going through that in real time because everyone wants information on this thing, so they're pumping out info left and right. Like I was reading today, there was a study that was done. It was in the Financial Times where they were saying their hypothesis was that twice as many people in the UK have died from this than is being reported. And we're even seeing that in North Carolina. There was a report out by the, in fact, all these journalists. It was a collaborative effort by Nick Oxner at WBTV, Emily Featherston down at WECT, someone at the News and Observer, someone at one of the public journalist institutes. I mean, it was just like a ton of journalists were involved in this thing. And they were trying to get death certificate information. They've been having a hard time doing it, but they said that they just don't know. I mean, there's like some death certificates that are saying that it was coronavirus and maybe it wasn't, and others that it was and aren't saying it. And so it's just,
there's people not
don't know
treatment. I have a friend who's a physician, and she was posting that there's people dying of heart attacks and blood clots and things that are normally treatable because they're not going to the hospital when they have these symptoms. So now you've got other deaths being caused by coronavirus that are not infected by the coronavirus.
Well, and that was why the death rate was going to be as high as it was, because the argument is that you were going to have that as well as people, unable to go to the hospital because it would be so overrun. Now, we luckily haven't faced that. New York probably is, though. And some other places, Italy and some other places. That's why they said the death toll is probably higher in some of these places, because people couldn't get to the hospital and they died at home and they never got tested. And they, took the body, and we have no idea. And so, I mean, that was always, I guess, sort of calculated in, but it's weird that instead of people not being able to access a doctor, they're choosing not to access a doctor because they're worried about catching coronavirus
it's or whatever the fear. It is. And that's probably my biggest issue with this whole situation, is that it has created a panic in people. A fear, and there are rational fears, there are acceptable fears, there are hey, don't drive too fast, and different things that you can rationalize and say, hey, don't be afraid of riding in a car, but do it safely. Don't drive crazy, don't drink, don't you can do a lot of different events and sports and things that have danger to them, but you rationalize the fear. With this, it's very irrational. Because of the things that that have been put out there, as far as if you touch the same cereal box in the grocery store as someone else and you catch it and it has a super high death rate, it's way deadlier than the flu and all of these things, which are mostly true from what we can tell. I mean, I'm not saying there's been necessarily a hyperbole, but it's been based off of information we don't know. I mean, like you said, we may have had double the deaths. We may have had double to 500 times the amount of cases. We don't ultimately know what the rate is, but it's there's so many people living in fear. It's making them fear each other. I mean, I've seen the people in the grocery store, then they're looking at you funny, and it's tearing down humanity. And I saw a post today talking about sort of the moral implications of this beyond the economic and beyond the virus itself. What is this going to do to trust when people, are people going to get back on an airplane anytime soon, not knowing if the person next to them might kill them? Because that's the narrative being pushed right now, is that you have silent carriers that are spreading a horribly deadly disease.
But what's weird is they don't even know. They don't even know if they have it. I mean, that's what's so scary about this. It's not like, we've seen, remember there was that one case where that guy wanted to go see his wife in the maternity ward. He just had a kid and he lied about not having symptoms, and he did. And of course he had it, and some people got it. And I'm like, I get it. You want to see your kid, and I totally understand that mindset, but it's like, dude, I mean, you put your child at risk. It's like you put your wife at risk. That is insane to me. But the real scary thing is that people have it and have no symptoms. And so it's almost a trust thing, but it's just, I don't even know what that is. But I also think that we actually could end up being better off because of this, because now all of a sudden everyone's going to be washing their hands. They're going to be using hand sanitizer. They're going to be keeping their distance. I mean, these are all good things. I mean, when I watch a movie now, like the whole time I'm watching it, all I'm thinking is like, those people are way too close. Like, that's like, I'm in that mindset. Like, I'm in that mindset. And I mean, let's face it. There are certain people in society who are very touchy-feely, you know, the close talkers from Seinfeld. But the majority of people, they do like having a little bit of a space around them. And this, I think, is going to keep people in that mindset. Now, how long does it last? I don't know. You know, will we revert right back to where we were? Should we get rid of handshakes? What do you think? Should we get, I don't know. I don't know where I stand on that. I kind of like handshakes, but if they went away, I don't know if I would cry.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I will probably keep shaking hands, but if one day I have kids and that becomes a new standard that they don't adopt, I won't force it on. You know, I mean, it's just, I'm already established in, you know, I think it says a lot societally, and until that changes, you know, I'm not gonna be like, oh no, I'm not gonna shake your hand now. I'm not that's the living in fear part. I'm not getting, because here's the issue, is like you pointed out, hopefully some things will change for the good, because I think we've gone so far to an extreme that maybe we could take some of these lessons and move back to the middle. Because when we talk about things like the flu, for instance, and you have 30, 40, 50,000 people a year die every single year because we don't do any of these things, how many lives could we have saved if we were wiping down shopping carts and not, you know, sneezing and shaking hands and doing stupid stuff like that? You know, maybe and we already knew this. So maybe this was a shock to change some behavior.
I don't think most people knew this. I mean, did you ever see that press conference where, you know, they were joking about, there's one thing is one of Trump's ticks that he does is he'll say like, oh, no one knew that. And it's always him like admitting he didn't know that. But if he doesn't know it, he assumes everyone else does it. And he was talking about how 30,000 people die every year of the flu. Like, no one knew that. And I think he's right. Like, I mean, if someone would have asked me how many people die from the flu before all of this, I would have been like, I don't know, 1,000. Like, I never would have thought it was 30, 40,000 people a year dying from the flu. And once again, just like the flu and just like coronavirus, is that they are dying from the flu, but it's also because they have other problems.
It's from pneumonia. Generally. Yeah.
Like, and well, but I mean, also people are weak, you know, they're older. And so it's sort of like, well, if that didn't kill them, something else would have killed them, you know, in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever it is. And so it's not till everyone, I think, kind of woke up to that. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be a sort of a new normal, which I don't think is the worst thing ever. I think us, you know, like I said, washing your hands and I mean, I like shaking hands. I mean, I think it's like I think touching someone else and sort of like, hey, how are you? And, you know, putting your hand, you know, slapping their back or whatever. I think there's a value in that. I mean, you know, they've proven that, right? I mean, they've done studies where they found that, you know, human touch is insanely valuable. And I think it was horrible. I always hate to like quote this study, but I think the Nazis did that, where they would like raise children, one, you know, that they were giving like basic sustenance to and nothing else, and other ones that they were like coddling. And I think the ones that got no coddling or anything else had like very troubling developmental issues if they survived. And so we know there's a value in that. But I do think maybe being a little more selective in making sure that my hands are clean when I go to shake someone's hand is probably a good thing. If we all turn into like, who's the guy that hosts that show? Howie Mandel. Howie Mandel and Donald Trump are germaphobes. And so we all start, you know, it's funny. Someone actually said, it's amazing Trump hasn't like bragged that I always knew germs were going to be the end of us. Like, because when he became a politician, he couldn't be a germaphobe anymore. So he somehow was able to get himself out of that, but he used to be very against shaking hands. And so it's kind of funny that if we acted more like Trump, we would be in a better place. Well, never thought I'd say that.
A couple of weeks ago when Dr. Birx was talking about how she had her granddaughter, I believe.
Yeah.
He said, "You didn't go see him, did you?" That was a great moment in the press conferences, which I don't watch anymore.
And he was like, "Oh, I gotta go." You don't watch him anymore? Yeah, I don't watch him either. Well, I've heard they've gotten better though. I didn't like watching it because the whole time it was like, here comes a stupid question, and then here comes a stupid response, and then after like it was like a half an hour to 45 minutes, then they would get to like the real questions, and they'd be like, "Oh, let's talk about those charts and let's talk about like the science." But the first like 45 minutes, it was all gotcha questions.
Yeah, I didn't realize they were going to be like 2.5 hours a piece, and at that point, and I feel like they kept moving the time around.
Yeah, well,
it was like in the evening.
Well, it was like Trump was like changing the locations. Remember that? Like he was in the Rose Garden, and then He was back in the what's the press room called? I forgot the press room.
Brady press.
Yeah, Brady. Yeah. And then he was like, I mean, it was like they kind of were moving around, and yeah, they did seem to move him back. And it's almost like when I do a radio show, I have to book guests, and it's almost like Trump and his people are like booking guests for the press conference, and they're like, maybe that's what's taking long, is they haven't got the confirmation that people are still coming there, and they're like, we got to make sure the people are there before we go out, and so they keep pushing the time back. So yeah, I don't know why they keep moving the times around, but did you see Bret Baier the other day?
That was
in the audience.
Solid. Was it last night? Maybe.
Yeah, it was last night, and then he like stood up and then started hosting the show. So that's so awesome because I am someone who can't do like if I'm out of my element, it totally messes me up. So if I'm not in this studio doing this podcast, or if I'm not in my radio studio, like I always give mad props to hosts that can just go into like some studio, because like sometimes these syndicated hosts will go to they'll be traveling, and so they'll have to do their show, and so they'll go to an affiliate station and do the show from that. Hannity does that, and others. And I'm always like, I think that's amazing that they can do that, because I have to be like perfectly comfortable to be able to do it. And so maybe I need to learn how to have that skill. But for Bret Baier to be able just to stand up and just start hosting a show with all those people, I mean, like, I don't know. I just think
and just
I'm
hit
so
it.
Amazed.
That was, I mean, even as the camera is trying to refocus, cutting his audio on and just switching, and he just went into it beast mode. I mean, wasn't reading off paper, and he just started spouting off facts and rolling with it. It was impressive. I
would have loved to have known people in his ear. They're like, all right, turn around, do the show.
and I like that Trump gave him the shout out for being there as well.
Yeah, no, that's well, because Bret Baier's been joking about how Trump keeps stealing his show, because it's always like at 6:00. So I think they're like, well, we might as well put. Oh, by the way, did you see someone had tweeted about Bret Baier back when he was working for Fox, asking questions, and someone posted a clip of him and Tony Snow as press secretary.
Oh, I did see that.
Yeah,
I had forgotten about Tony Snow, and man, he was a real gem.
Well, I when I first got to talk radio, I was like so into it, and I was listening to everything I could find. And I remember driving somewhere. I think Tony had a show on the weekend, and he was talking on the show about how he's been offered to be the press secretary, and he was like talking about it on the air about should he do it? It's gonna be less money, and he's like, but this is like what people always talk about, right? Like actually taking your skill with talking and actually making a difference and going to work for an administration and like helping to, get stuff done versus just talking. And I remember him talking about it. And then he became the press secretary. And then of course he got diagnosed with cancer, and he had to leave. And when did he passed away? What, 2007, 8? It's been a while.
Maybe.
No, I think it was before. Was it 2007? I think it was 2007. And I mean, that was tragic, but I just remember him talking about, saying like, this is what we always talk about, me going to do something. And then he went and did it. And he was pretty good. I loved his, remember his spat with Helen Thomas.
Do you think any president has had a better press secretary lineup than George W. Bush? I mean, you're talking about Tony Snow, Ari Fleischer, and Dana
Perino. Don't forget Scott McClellan, right? Was McClellan? Was it Scott McClellan? Was he the other one? Was David Froome one too?
I don't remember.
In the early age? Yeah, I looked that up because one of them flipped. Was it McClellan or Froome? One of them and they both become kind of closer to the more moderate liberal side of the Republican Party, but I can't remember which one it was. I think it was McClellan was the earlier one. I don't know where David Froome came from. Maybe they both. I don't know. I have no idea. But no, he had good. He had a pretty good. He had a pretty good lineup. I love that Trump's last press secretary, what was it, Stephanie Grisham, never held a press conference. They were like, that's like awesome. She's going to go down in history as the first press secretary to never address the press. Like, that's a pretty good job if you can get it. I mean, it'd be like being a radio host and I never actually went on the air, but I had the job for like 6 months and I never hosted a radio show. Did you find out which one they were?
Yeah, we've got Ari Fleischer.
Okay.
First 2 years. Scott McClellan.
Okay.
Another 2, almost 3 years. Tony Snow.
Okay.
From 06 to 7, a year and a half. Dana Perino. finished it out.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, it's hard to rank them. I mean, they're all doing kind of the same thing. It's just they're all spinning whatever they got to do. I like that while we're talking about this, you got the George W. picture in the background. So.
Yeah, that was on the wall, and I figured I'd throw something in the background there. I might keep rotating that out, but
I like that. I like it.
Since he predicted all of this back in the day, I thought I'd bring that in.
I will say I do love the love that everyone has for W again. Like everyone that thought he was so dumb, and they're now like, oh man, I miss George W. Bush. Now here's a question for you before we close things out.
Is this going to be an actual question?
This is going to be an actual question. Okay. Do you think that the same thing is going to happen to Trump? Because I don't think it is, but the same way that they were like, oh man, I wish W was back here. Like I would have loved W. So let's say Trump, whatever. And then let's say the next president is, I don't know. One of my buddies said Josh Hawley would probably be, he sort of got that populist mantra. Will people be like, oh man, like I wish Trump was back here? Or do you think people will really because I don't remember anyone ever saying that about Reagan. Because they didn't like Reagan. I mean, they liked him, but I didn't hear when Bush was in president, no one said, oh man, I wish Reagan was back here. And so do you think people will be like, oh, I wish Trump was here? And it's just, is Trump uniquely hated, or will he be like every other Republican president?
No, I think the hate for him from certain people will fade. Because I think there's so many people caught up in the moment, and they'll look back on, because we've talked about that before. A lot of the policies are actually not extreme. There's a lot of people that
he's moderate
of the aisle that he's done things for and really shouldn't be totally against him wholeheartedly. But there are a lot of people that no matter what he did, no matter what he did tomorrow, he would be hated by them, or just the Trump derangement syndrome, if you will. So I think he'll be less hated. I think he'll definitely be memorable. You can't tell me they won't be showing clips of his briefings in J schools all over the country for the next 50 years. I would think that would happen, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Clinton never got any retrospective adoration. In fact, I think more and more, I think his popularity has faded a little bit. Because I think there were a lot of people that defended him in the scandal and everything at the time, but they kind of back in the light of Me Too and different things of Epstein, and they're kind of like, maybe Bill was a little creepy. The Me Too movement wiped out Clinton's
sort of aura, and then I think also his wife, who's a horrible politician, also destroyed the legacy. Huh? Well, I mean, she's not a good person, but she's not a good politician.
Yeah.
And then while that's been happening, so if you go back, people forget how talented Bill Clinton was as an orator and sort of off the cuff kind of a politician.
Yeah. Very charismatic.
But he's had some health issues, and he's like Biden. He's gone not that Biden was ever like Clinton, not even close, but he's kind of faded. And so the only thing that's left is an old wrinkled up Bill Clinton and Hillary, who's always been bad. And it's people are like, and so they're sort of that's what's in, they won't go away. Bill kind of he's realized he's past his prime, stay out of the limelight, be remembered for his greatness, but his wife keeps ruining everything for him. So I think maybe that's a little bit why, but I just wonder if Trump's going to get this.
I think what you're talking about really helped Bush, is that him and Laura just kind of went and did their own thing. They didn't try to get out there and stay in the limelight and be focal points and say things. And I think that Obama has been pretty good about that, about kind of just stepping away and letting a couple of years go by.
Said who? Obama?
Obama, yeah.
I think he's gotten a little too more involved. Now, I think Bush 100%. Bush is smart. I think Bush also didn't want to get involved. See, I think Obama still wants to be involved.
Well,
so he keeps sticking his head in because he's got nothing else.
Yeah.
Bush has got his painting and his, ranch.
He's at a different stage in life too. Obama's still young. I mean, he kind of peaked early. It's like when you're president in your 40s, and then it's like, okay, what am I going to do now? W.
Netflix.
Was, in his 60s, you know, when he left. So it's like he's retired. He's got grandkids. He's got a rant. He's done it.
Yeah.
Obama, you know, he's like, what am I going to do now for the next 50 years?
Well, I think the other problem, and this is the problem Trump's going to have. And man, when Trump leaves, it's going to be insane because, you know, other presidents, this is what's happened. This is one of the problems that we have with politics in general, especially the presidency, is that it used to be about getting elected and then governing. And now it's just about running for office. And so the reason Obama was not a good president, I mean, he was good at running for president. And so he can't kind of sit back and go, look what I've done. He didn't really do anything. I mean, like Obamacare, yeah, sure.
But that was shown through. He didn't build coalitions by, like Bush with No Child Left Behind. And
yeah, I mean, you can disagree about Bush's legacy, but he did a lot. And so it's like, I made a difference. And I think Trump's going to have the same issue because, as you mentioned, a lot of the stuff Trump's done, you know, there's a great piece by Ramesh Ponnuru a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about, you know, Trump and sort of what the power that Trump had. He said, don't be worried about Trump, you know, using his power because Trump actually gets pushed around a lot by the GOP establishment. And if you look at the things that he's done while in office, they've all been things that the Republicans wanted. Like instead of, you know, forcing a wall being built or dealing with immigration or trade when he first got in office, they did tax cuts, they did deregulation, they got conservative judges. And it's because he didn't really, you know, he was good at running for president, but he didn't really know what to do when he won. And they were like, here's what you do. And they pushed all this stuff that he wanted. And so those aren't really Trump's things. And so when he leaves office, he's going to be in the same problem that Obama's in, where he's going to be like, I want to be involved in the running for president thing again. I want to be that. And I think that's the problem that Obama has, is that like Bush and Reagan and all these other guys, Clinton was pretty quiet because they did something, because they had an agenda, they got it done, and they left.
He had to work with Newt. Reagan had to work with Tip. I mean, you know, that's
one of the greatest pivots in political history. You know, we're going to push universal health care, and then they lose the 94 election, and then all of a sudden it's the era of big government's over, welfare reform and tax cuts. Well, I guess not tax cuts. Actually, they actually did increase taxes, but it was, you know, deregulation and sort of
donations.
I mean, it worked. I mean, it worked for him. There's no doubt about that. So I think that is going to be one of the problems that Trump's going to have, is that same problem that Obama has, where it's like they really liked running for president. I'm not sure if they like being president, but they liked running for it. And there's going to be a couple election cycles. Now, Trump's going to be really old, though, when he gets out. You know, I mean, he's either, because what is he now? What is he, 73? Something like that?
He's up there.
So he could be like 75. He's either going to be like 74, 75, or close to 80 when he gets out of office. He might just be like, I'm done. I'm going to Mar-a-Lago. I'm going to play golf. That's all I'm doing. He might just.
The more you see Biden, and I know polling says one thing, and we know how well polls go, but I guess kind of a final thought: how are things looking right now for Biden versus Trump reelection? Or do you think it's just still too early?
I mean, I think the data shows Biden's got a lead, but I don't know. I mean, there was one poll that showed, I think it was the Wall Street Journal poll, that showed Biden doing well. Like, if this, you know, who'd you want in charge of the crisis? They said Biden. Who would you want in charge of an emergency? They said Biden. But when they asked who they wanted in charge of the economy, Trump had a double-digit lead. He had like a 12-point lead over Biden. And so it depends on where people are. If this economy is still just having problems, they might go, damn, we need someone that's going to fix this, and we got to keep Trump in office. But if they're like, oh my, this is a crisis, this is emergency, we want someone in office who's going to be able to handle this better, they might go with Biden. So it really just depends on the mindset. But I think what's crazy about this, I think they're both benefiting from it at the same time. Like, I think it makes Trump look presidential to some extent, but it also helps Biden because no one's talking to him. And so his gaffes can't happen because
nobody's paying attention to him.
Yeah. And so I think they're both benefiting from this. Trump, because you're seeing more of them, and Biden, because you're seeing less. Mm-hmm. And so that's also going to play. So if this thing kind of tapers off, it's going to completely change things. But I would say, as of right now, I think Biden has a slight edge
Well, it was
But I
interesting
don't know.
today. I noticed on CNBC there was a poll they were talking about as far as they had asked, what do people think about the nature of the shutdowns? Was it too aggressive versus kind of proportional? Yes, we should definitely do that. And as far as who thought it was aggressive, 55% of Republicans said that the response to the coronavirus had been aggressive. 3% of Democrats. So I think that's very, very telling as well, because
there's a political divide. There's no doubt. I mean, it's
motivating certain people.
Well, and here's a scary thing. And I didn't get a chance to look at the numbers in detail, but I saw over the last 2 days, a couple people have written about seniors who are obviously very concerned, the most at risk. And they're worried that Trump may be opening things up too quickly. And let's face it, I mean, that's a huge demo for Trump. I mean, he won them by a huge margin in 2020. And so if there's any erosion there, it could be problematic. And so it could be temporary, but that's something that I think Trump has to sort of also calculate, is because it's kind of funny because you see all these like Republicans that are like, so what if old people die? I'm like, guys, that's a big voting block for the Republicans. Like if 80 plus is like 80% Republican. So
and you forget that when an old Republican dies, they then become a voting Democrat. So it really swings double
either through illegal means, or they're reincarnated as a woke child born into a vegan commune family. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something that Trump needs to also be wary of, is there are potential. But then I saw a poll that showed Trump with like 30% of the Hispanic vote, and I was flabbergasted. I mean, those are like Bush 04 numbers. Remember Bush? I think 04 got like 30% of the Hispanic vote. So that would be pretty crazy. But then again, there was also that poll that showed Trump getting like 30% of the black vote, and everyone's like, it's working. And then like every other poll from that since then's been like 8%, like where it's supposed to, where it always is for Republicans. So, it's hard to know, but we could see some demographic shifts. We could see some seniors upset at Trump, and maybe some Hispanics that are going to vote, and maybe they'll cancel each other out. Maybe not. But I think it is a little early to tell, especially with the coronavirus.
Well, Tyler, I think this is nicely come to an end. Any final thoughts?
No, I can't believe that was a quick hour. That was a quick hour. I will say that was a very
quick hour. And, numbers keep changing. We'll be back next week and catch up on everything. And we'll, by next week, we're going to start to see some opening plans. I mean, a week, April 29th will be our episode next week. And you're talking about, Georgia looking at opening up, kind of leading the fray, but a lot of other governors rolling out plans. So we might have Cooper's plan by then. Governor Ford.
What's funny is the 29th is when our the statewide order expires. So we'll have a decision on what he's going to do. But what's crazy is we should have some data. So if these places that are opening, if we start seeing spikes, I know there's about a 5-day delay on this, so we may not have it exactly. But if we don't see spikes, then states keep going. If we do see spikes, then that's going to lead to other states being hesitant. So we will have some unscientific but data nonetheless next week.
That's
Looking
right.
Forward to it.
Full of uneducated and exciting
non-peer reviewed.
We peer review live.
That's true. That is true.
All right. I'll see you next week.
All right, dude. See you.